special.
Okay, yes. Welcome back to the Child Voice podcast. And I was just telling Kelly that she is our first guest. And so I want to thank her. Yes, our guest today is Kelly Slattery, and she is a facilitator in child welfare. And her goal really, her position really helped guide families, professionals through key meetings. And we're going to talk about some of those meetings like family engagement meetings, youth-centered meetings, permanency planning team meetings, all the different meetings that child welfare has.
Yeah.
And Kelly's work is really all about creating spaces where children and families can be heard, where important decisions are made thoughtfully, and where advocates can play a real role in supporting kids. Kelly, we're really glad that you're here to share your insights and give us kind of a behind the scenes look at how these meetings really work. So, again, I want to thank you for being our first guest. I know it can kind of be a little bit nerve-wracking, but I promise you it's only us and advocates that are going to see this video. So,
Okay.
yeah, to get us started, Kelly, can you just share a little bit about your role as a facilitator in child welfare and the types of meetings that you participate, that you lead or participate in?
So my official titles, yes, Family Engagement Meeting Coordinator, with the main meeting being family engagement meetings, and those meetings are an opportunity to gather attorneys and service providers and parents and the worker and everybody and CASA together to talk about that particular case. I also do youth center meetings, which are focused. We typically start those at age 16 for kids. They can start earlier, but typically we find age 60 is kind of a good age to start those meetings. And those meetings are completely focused on youth. And in fact, the youth can decide not to even have a meeting, which some do, and they get to decide who they want to invite to the meeting. So it really is youth-centered meetings. And those are probably my favorite meetings to do, actually. And then Permanency planning team meetings are meetings not about 3 months after the case gets started. So they're fairly early. Family engagement meetings we usually do about 5 to 6 months after a case is started. And youth center meetings again when kids over the age of 16 or older. And then permanency plan team meetings are a meeting where we gather the ongoing worker, the supervisor, child's attorney, and if, and then either the CASA or the new, what's called advocates, special advocates, the parents, and the parents can choose to invite other people as well. And we talk about what's called concurrent planning. So in our cases, from the very beginning, always reunification is our goal, but from the very beginning, we talk about what we say is concurrent planning, or sometimes use the words plan B. And those are if for some reason parents could not parent, whether something happens to parents, which has sadly happened in cases, or whether we decide to move forward with a guardianship or adoption, who would they want parent their children? And so this meeting is important in the sense that we really want that plan B. And sometimes with the PPT, we get a clearer picture of that, and sometimes we do not. That's PPT is the short form for permanency planning team. And so sometimes we have to have more meetings related to that. That issue of plan B is asked again and again and again. Every family engagement meeting, even if we kind of have one, we make sure that's still that person, or if it's not that person anymore, who else would it be? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yes. And as you brought up a good point, child welfare in the system loves their acronyms, right? And so you'll often
Yes.
hear FEM, YCM, PPT, FIM, like all the different acronyms, right?
We
Acronym
love our
favorite.
acronyms, and I'll
Yeah.
work hard through this not to do them, but
No,
it
that's
is
okay. Yeah, lots of acronyms. So kind
lots and
of
lots.
big picture, or just maybe in in a word or two, why are these meetings so important in a child's case?
It's a word or two. Can I do it in a word or two?
Yeah, that's okay.
I I think it's a opportunity, especially the family engagement meeting. The other people that also get invited, which I did not mean to, but are foster parents and or any family, and it's one of the places that everybody gets together to talk about what's going on in this case. What's to me the most important about that is we are talking about how the children are doing. We talk about how parents are doing on their treatment plans. We talk about visitation, but I think a lot of times, a lot of court cases, it seems to be so focused on what are parents doing, what are parents doing, what are parents doing, that we kind of forget that child or children are actually the main focus in my eyes. Of this case. And so I like that we have an opportunity to visit about the children and how each of them are doing in this meeting. And it's the first thing we do actually is talk about them.
I love that. Yeah, get it
Like,
started off with the kids.
yep.
Do you find when you have FEMs on cases, do you find that it helps the case keep moving forward or not get stuck or stagnant, or even just help hold parties accountable to kind of those next steps?
I would say for the majority of time, I would say all of that. It helps move a case forward. It helps keep everybody accountable for what because at the end, is there things that need to be done? And then we have another family engagement meeting, which we call family engagement review meeting, and we'll check in. Did these things get done? Did they not get done? What I also like about these meetings and where I feel like CASA, if I don't mind throwing in where CASA fits in, is that
Yeah.
CASA's job is best interest of the children. And to be honest, they're the truly only advocate is best interest of the children. Um, CFS has to work with birth parents, kids, we have all of that going on. The child's attorney literally represents what the child wants. And the CASA is the one person that speaks to what they think the best interests of the children are. And I think that's why it's really important that if CASAs can attend family engagement meetings, I love that supervisors or peer coordinators can, because I just think their voice is really important in this.
Mhm. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it typical, or maybe it's case dependent as far as having, do you typically try to have follow-up FEMs, every couple months, every 3 months? I mean, kind of what does that look like after that initial FEM?
It really depends on kind of where the case is at. If a
Okay.
case is somewhat stagnant and this is the first time maybe everybody got together and got maybe things moving again, I tend to do meetings a little sooner, maybe like every 2 months. If
Mm-hmm.
it's a case that's moving along pretty well, I maybe will do it every 3 months. I also ask the worker and the parents as well, kind of what they want and need. So I know there are three family engagement meeting coordinators here in the office, and I know each of us do it slightly different just because people do things slightly different. But that's what I tend to do is if a case is stagnant and we maybe get some stuff moving to keep that moving, we try to meet a little bit sooner.
I love
So
that. Is it ever an option, like let's say there's not another FEM scheduled and maybe things are just maybe not going well in the case or kind of, stuck stagnant, just a myriad of things. Is it ever an option or what would it look like for a CASA to request maybe an FEM or is that even possible?
very possible. And what it looks like is an email to whoever the family engagement meeting coordinator is, and maybe just and I would include the worker. So the worker and the family engagement meeting coordinator, and an explanation of why they feel like they need one, why we feel like we need one. And I think CASAs have in the past, and I'm hoping CASA will continue to request if they feel like
Hmm.
something's going on. Because as you know, workers' lives are incredibly busy, and maybe in the back of their
Yeah.
mind, they're like, "We need a family engagement meeting," but
Yeah.
something the next crisis comes and out of their
Hmm.
brain that goes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Kind of switching gears a little bit. You explained, youth-centered meetings, and it's all about the youth
Yeah.
and the child's voice, and they have an option whether they want to
Yeah.
do it or not. How do you guys, I guess, really ensure the child's perspective is prioritized in that meeting? Like, what kind of walk us through what that looks like and really making sure that their voice is heard?
So there all of our meetings have a certain agenda to them, and these
Mm-hmm.
particular youth center meetings, there are certain areas that we are particularly focusing on, especially because we're talking kids of 16 and older that are in our system who may end up aging out of our system. Not all of them are going to, but a lot of them sadly do. So we focus a lot on, like, we literally talk about education and what's going on, and are they in high school, and if high school's going well, and if they're not, is a high set or GED, working on that a possibility, and having their voice in that. Now again, having their voice doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's important too. And but I have seen kids who have worked who really do not do well in school for all sorts of reasons, and at these meetings have requested to do the high set, and the team talked it through and it was decided, yeah, let's get you signed up at Lincoln Center, which is in Billings, the place that does the high set. Um, yeah, we talk about housing and what their current housing looks like and what they want their other housing look like. One of the few people that I say they get to invite everybody. One of the few people that I typically make sure gets invited is the Chafee worker. So the Chafee worker is a worker that works with kids starting at age 14 to get them prepared for basically adulthood. So that is the one worker that probably I'm not so like, no, that person can't come, because that person has information about if that child does age out at 18, the options they have related to school and some housing option and things that program in particular can help do. Um, but we just try to listen to the child's voice, like if they want to get a job. Let's talk about that. What does that look like? What would that mean? And a lot of it is kind of life skills conversations, so to say. And just to talk about transportation, is there a possibility they can get their driver's license? If not, what's the barrier? Can that barrier be fixed? Sometimes it can't, because sometimes it's just related to the fact that they don't have a car to practice driving, those types of things. So we just really work hard, and I always ask the child first, when I'm doing the meeting, or I should say teen, ask the teen first, what is your housing situation like that? What do you think is going to happen when you turn 18? Those types of things. So, and we may, at age 16, we may have one meeting and wait another till 6 months or so. As they get closer and closer to 18, we tend to pick those meetings up. And they could be 15 minutes, but just to check in, see what's going on, see what the team needs, those types of things.
Yeah, I love that. Just again, kind of, we often hear a lot of times with the youth, it's all about me without me, right? And this is a
Yeah,
great opportunity and way just to engage them and give them that little bit of control back, right? In a
yeah,
very out of control
yeah,
situation for sure. I
yeah.
love YCMs as well.
Yeah,
So
they are my favorite for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, they're
So
pretty
yeah,
great.
yeah.
So obviously we love when meetings go well, right? Everybody, good conversation, but we also know that the reality is challenges come up in these meetings, right? What are some of the challenges that you often see in these meetings, and how do you typically try to address those? Because there's a lot of emotions, a lot of passion, right? There's a lot of messiness in these meetings, and so yeah, kind of what are some challenges that you see in these meetings?
I would say that probably the two biggest challenges I see is a parent who's just really frustrated with the department in general, and it almost doesn't even want to be at this meeting, and just or sets up even the meeting that you could tell are just frustrated and angry, and this is stupid, and why am I here? And family engagement meetings are also loosely, parents can not necessarily do them, but typically we force that point a tiny bit, just because we've realized, I think majority of time they're helpful. Occasionally they aren't, and I feel like if even with somebody who's angry with the department, this meeting can be really helpful, because I at least try to remain somewhat neutral. um I'm not there to say no, that's wrong. Now the CPS worker can say no, that's wrong, but I'm not there to just berate somebody over and over and over again. And it can be an opportunity to let somebody express their feelings, but then also the CPS worker to hear that. And then maybe the CPS worker, sorry, they have different titles now, but CPS worker can give some kudos. And I think that there's some opportunities for that. And then, but sometimes, no matter how hard I try to facilitate something like that, it doesn't work. And that might be a family engagement meeting I don't do another review for, depending upon, just kind of like, if it's
Hmm.
just kind of, I'm really hate CPS and I don't care what's going to happen, it's probably not worth doing that again. Um, the other time I find it sometimes is when family members are there and there's conflict with family. So conflict between the family members, or even sometimes foster parents, even though they're not kinship, just that conflict between parents and and family and or foster parents can sometime arise out of the meeting. And with that, I try to steer it away from, again, a lot of times it's negativity on the foster parents or family side, and understandably so. They're frustrated, they're angry, they don't like the way the child's they don't, they know the child's history of abuse and are upset about that. But I try to direct that again into more positive, and that you, of course, you have the right to be frustrated, but let's focus on what we're going to do to make this better. So I would say those are the two main ones. There's sometimes other things that pop up, but those are the two main conflicts that occur.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you said, just a lot of emotions, a lot of, yeah,
Yep.
especially like when you said when you bring in family members, right?
Yep.
There's so much history and burnt bridges and
Yeah.
dynamics and
Yeah.
yeah, a whole different ball game when it comes to kinship and family. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
how do you keep it moving forward? So awesome. So changing gears a little bit more too, I know you talked about permanency planning team meetings
Yeah.
and how permanency really is kind of a theme throughout all of these meetings,
Mhm.
from the moment, intake steps in that door and
Yep.
thinking about that permanency planning. Super critical. What should CASA advocates understand about the purpose and really those expected outcomes of those permanency planning team meetings?
Yes. So I mean, the purpose is to focus in on who's out there that who could parent these children if birth parents can't. And we start off, we don't say absolutely no to people. I mean, the reality is that we have been able to place kids with people who have had history with child and family services, that's maybe super old, and they're able to get things overturned. And so it's not an automatic no when they bring up Aunt Susan, and Aunt Susan has child and family services history. So we as a team, I feel like, just need to, is this truly a possibility, and explore and figure out what it would take to that really be, and is that in the best interest of the children. And I know sometimes for CASAs it can be frustrating, just because I've been doing this particular job and a lot of this job for a while, is that family really is where kids do best. And so sometimes I think it could be frustrating for CASAs. I mean, maybe they're in a foster home and are doing really well in that foster home, but it's not kinship, and we find inappropriate kinship. And study after study after study shows that kids do best raised by kinship placements. Yes, foster parents are amazing. Yes, many foster parents have raised children and done an amazing job raising foster kids, and but I think that can sometimes be frustrating for, because they got this kid's doing so well here. Why would we move him? Well, we move him because they do better. I mean, it's policy as well, but to me, it's also, that's what research shows. It's not just policy. Research shows that kids do better when they're raised by their families. And if it can't be birth parents, it might be Aunt Susie.
Right.
So,
So what is the difference between a PPT, a permanency planning team
yeah.
meeting, and a family identification meeting, a FIM? What is the difference
Yeah.
between those two?
So the permanency planning team meeting is literally, that is the only focus, is who is your plan B. That's all we talk about. That is it. Family engagement meetings are much bigger. I mean, permanency planning team meetings usually take, I would say, 15 minutes typically, depending upon, but family engagement meetings, the first one typically takes an hour to an hour and a half, depending upon how many kids are involved. We're going to talk about the children. We're going to talk about visits. We're going to talk about the treatment plans. We're going to really dive into those things. As well as at the end, I usually do it at the end, talk about concurrent planning again. But the main focus, the main body of family engagement meeting is kind of like, where's the case? How are the children doing? What do birth parents need to do to keep moving forward? Is kind of the main focus. Well, permanency planning teams literally is just plan B or concurrent planning.
And I apologize, Kelly. I said the wrong meeting. What's what's the difference between a PPT and a FIM, a family identification
Oh,
meeting?
okay, sorry. No worries.
Sorry.
So that's it. So family identification meetings, I think almost meeting is still a meeting, but it's kind of one of those things that that is done very early on the case. Typically, sometimes attorneys aren't even assigned. That's how early this case is, or just our kids, our attorneys are just being assigned. We meet this family engagement meeting coordinators and meet with parents just one on one. We usually have something called the Seneca search, which is a search that's done out of an organization out of California that whose purpose is to help us find relatives for kids in foster care. And we'll sit down with birth parents and go over that Seneca search to see like who the people are on the Seneca search, who's missing, often people are missing. um and then like, so we go through the Seneca search and they oh, this is my mom is not a placement option. Oh, this is my, so it's kind of the precursor to the permanency planning team. It's figuring out who is out there who truly is an option for placement. Again, in the parents' eyes, we aren't going to necessarily nitpick, oh, that can't be because grandma has history, with child and family services. It's more of like who out there. And so that meeting, like I said, is typically even done, barely attorneys are assigned. Well, it depends upon when you get a hold of birth parents, but it's really very informal, and it's usually just the family engagement meeting coordinator, and the parents. And a lot of times they end up being via phone because they aren't very long. So instead of dragging somebody into the office, I'm always happy to have people come into the office. I always am a big believer that, in person is better usually for people, but most of the time it's done on the phone.
Perfect. So those are typically most likely going to have happened, like you said before, even a CASA
Yeah,
even comes on.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
so
yeah,
they may read or hear reference
yeah,
that a film was offered or was held or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and we do, and notes are typed up, but those are notes that we just use internally for all sorts of reasons. Partially because there's usually addresses and sometimes phone numbers and things on
Mhm.
it, and so that's not something that everybody has access to.
Yeah,
So
makes
you can
sense.
ask, but the answer will be no.
That's good. In the films, in the PPTs, and all these different meetings, is it also when we talk about kinship that would also include fictive kin? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. So yeah.
Okay.
So fictive kin, which in our policy is somebody the child knew before Child and Family Services got involved. So it can't be a random person that that all of a sudden, if the child has not met them or had spent time with them prior to, and we've placed with teachers, we've placed with best friends. I mean, that would be considered fictive kin.
Yeah, I love that. Just kind of that thinking outside the box, or even yeah, who
Yeah.
kids feel yeah is
Yeah.
family like. So, okay, so again, just kind of moving forward, you already answered this a little bit,
Yeah.
but we really want CASA advocates to participate in the
Yes.
meetings. Is there
Yes.
anything that you find that is more helpful than not that they can contribute, or I mean, I know you mentioned before really advocating for the child's best interest, but is there anything, any topics, information that you find more helpful for them to contribute?
I think one of the things that I see with a lot of CASAs that I appreciate, that maybe we aren't getting other places, is their connection with the schools. So they often have information about the schools that maybe we don't have or have sort of. I mean, just in general, CASA's talking about seeing kids and how they're doing. There's another set of eyes in a foster home or kinship home, or if they're back home on a trial home visit. So the fact that they see these children, talk to these kids, they build a relationship with them different than the worker can. So I do think that that's also really important, you know, is that often there's a relationship built, and this is somebody the child does trust. And so I do feel like not always, but often CASAs become very integral part of the child's life in general. And I know some CASAs who, remained in contact even after the case ended because of that relationship. And so I think that they just, because they have such, I think, an important relationship with the child or children. And I also really appreciate those CASAs who reach out to the school and talk to school, because when they can give me a report about what they think how the kids are doing, I often get information about the school that won't be getting anywhere else. Um, so those are, I mean, I just think CASAs are very, what I find is I think for CASAs, this is also this meeting, family engagement meetings and youth center meetings, is an opportunity to kind of also get a clear picture of what the bigger picture that's going on. That sometimes in court is hard to, depending upon which judge and whether you're, recovery court's a whole different thing. But if it's just kind of status hearings, sometimes those are short and mom and dad are doing this, kids are fine. Well, is that really what's going on?
Yeah,
So yeah.
I love
So
that.
I love that when CASAs come. Yeah. Yeah. And I know, and if they can't come, I love when they're a peer person or when a staff person can come. Um,
Right. Having
because
somebody there. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Is there anything that is not helpful? Maybe, you know, kind of dropping some bombs or,
Yes.
feeding into emotions. And so, what would not be helpful for an advocate to do in these meetings?
So, I think that, yeah, if you've got information that no one else knows but you, do not share that in a larger meeting until you've talked to a worker, unless there's just some reason that's not possible. And if it's not possible, then contact the worker and contact your family engagement meeting coordinator ASAP, just to say, this is happening. I feel like I need to share this, because dropping bombs can set a meeting back quickly. And if a worker in particular doesn't even know what's going on, it can, I mean, not only are parents going, what the heck, the worker's going, what the heck, and that isn't helpful in a meeting at all. If it is just something you feel like it needs to be said, contact the worker ASAP. I think most things, if they're bomb-like things, I think those things don't necessarily need to be in family engagement meetings. If it's something that's really big that a worker and attorneys and parents need to talk about, that's very different than what happens at a family engagement meeting. And so just to be very careful about, like, sometimes um, I would say the other thing that's not helpful is if you completely disagree with our placement, and where the children are. That's something you can definitely talk to the worker and the worker supervisor about, but it's usually not helpful in a family engagement meeting, again, unless there are some really big reasons. So just be careful. I would say bombs is perfect. Don't be sharing information that that maybe shouldn't be in this whole meeting, you know.
Perfect. So it
Yeah.
sounds like there's really a different venue or a different way to handle bigger conversations like that,
Oh
that
yeah.
this is really just not the place for it.
Typically not. I mean, once in a while we do end up doing big things in these
Mm-hmm.
meetings. It
Mm-hmm.
does happen, and we can usually make it work. But what I've found, especially if it's something about birth parents, maybe that's almost embarrassing, it's
Okay.
not helpful to be sharing, that you found out birth mom is really seeing the boyfriend on the side,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't know that. Talk to the worker first. Maybe it will get brought up. But if we talk to the worker first and the worker can talk to the parent, then it can be appropriately brought up. But just kind of throwing
Mm-hmm.
that in a meeting. And again, we don't want to shame our birth parents. It doesn't help them change. And
Right.
so that's another thing I think is this just going to be, again, shaming things end up being said and talked to about in these meetings. But as much as we can limit some of that, I think is better.
Okay. So is it also fair to kind of say if maybe an advocate is expecting, I don't know, some big topic to be brought up and talked about in an FEM, and then they get through the FEM and it's not talked about. Is it really fair to say then it just wasn't appropriate, or to follow up with the caseworker afterwards and kind of figure out why or what happened or why it wasn't discussed in an FEM?
Yep. Yeah, definitely contact your caseworker if there's something that you were expecting and it didn't happen. And what I've had costs is also like stay behind, so that also works. I mean, I know sometimes getting hold of workers is nearly impossible. And so if you Casa, I've had Casa say, Kelly and whoever the worker is, can you stay a few minutes, and we've been able to talk through things, and that's happened a couple times. Um, and again, often what I find is that the worker didn't even know something was going on, that the CASA did know what was going on. And so we are more than happy to stay behind. It's usually the best time to be quite honest, is to
Yeah,
just say, I need, and I don't necessarily have to stay, but maybe I do depending upon the situation. But, can I talk to you for a few minutes after the meeting? And it's a
I
good
love that
time.
option. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, just hey, this
Yeah.
wasn't brought up,
Hey.
or hey, I noticed
Yeah.
this, or yeah, or
Yeah.
I'm getting. So how would you maybe information is being presented in there where you happen to have maybe opposite information or additional
Yeah.
information. Is that
Yeah.
something that you would encourage advocates to, respectfully share that, hey, I actually have more of an update on that, or the information I learned is actually this? How
I
would
mean,
you, I guess, kind of guide them in if information is being presented as not what they believe is accurate?
again, I think if they can do it in a way that's not going to be bomb-like or be very shaming to a birth parent, I think very much so. You can say, "Oh, by the way, I just talked to the teacher. This is what the teacher told me." And that's probably one of the more common ones is I get from foster parents, "This is how school's going," and then the class is like, not quite, and I think that's really appropriate. No, I talked to the teacher yesterday or a week ago, and you know, Sally's having a lot of problems in class. I'm sorry that and so I think those types of things are very important because they may have the most up-to-date information. Again, if I think it's a big bomb-like thing, no, they probably let's wait for that, and the worker can work with the parents to talk about whatever that bomb-like thing is. Or I've had things related to kids. Oh, the foster parent occasionally doesn't come, can't come, won't, doesn't want to come. I don't force foster parents and kinship parents to attend the meetings, but so maybe they have information that, oh, they're seeing this counselor now that the worker may not even know has been set up. You know what I mean? Just because of the communication that CASAs tend to have with foster and kinship parents as well. So that makes sense. What
Yeah.
I think is probably appropriate. Got to be
Yeah.
careful with some of the other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think remembering too, for CASAs, anybody else, right? Like this is not their meeting, right? Like
No,
you're there
no,
to gather information, share
yeah,
information, but it's also you don't want to dominate it. You're not there to, yeah,
no,
like I said, just completely blow up the case or
yeah,
call people out. That it really is an engagement meeting, right?
exactly.
And like you were saying, if you go in armor up or guns blazing,
Yeah,
right? No, there's not going to be any engagement.
no, no. And it becomes, yeah, yeah.
One of
And
the other things I just thought of too is that oftentimes I'll see where family engagement meetings in particular that they'll be bifurcated or that you'll do one
yeah,
parent first and then another
yeah,
parent a different time.
yes.
Can you kind of talk through or explain to advocates why you would do that?
Yeah. So it's the most common reason is if there's an order of protection or a no contact order in place. And when those are in place, we try to, I mean, you don't want to be getting the other parent, maybe who the no contact order is against, in trouble just because they came to this meeting. And often there's reasons for those orders and often involving emotional physical violence, so not necessarily going to be helpful to have the two people in the room together either, just because I don't think, especially the survivor, is not going to speak their piece or their voice if the other person that's they're scared of is hanging out in the meeting. So often it's because of that reason. Occasionally I have workers, or I have even parents say they'd like to have the meeting split up, even though there's not an order of protection in place. So I'm just respectful of that, um, and we try very hard. It can be like sometimes we separate those meetings, and one of the children's not even this parent's kiddo, so we not necessarily. We may talk about that kid sort of, but not in the same in depth we would talk about with that parent there at that meeting. So yeah, sometimes it's about safety, whether it's emotional or physical safety is typically the reason.
Yeah, thank you for that. Is there ever times where the parent doesn't, maybe it's a kinship placement or even just a regular placement? Do parents get to choose who comes to that meeting or who doesn't come? Like let's say like kids are placed with my mom and I really don't want to hear my mom's guff today, right? Like, or, whatever it may be. Do they get to decide who comes or who doesn't come to the meeting?
I for sure attempt to contact them and find out who they may or may not want. It may be to me it can be somewhat impossible if the person that that mom's taking care of the kids and she's the main source of information related to the children. What I try to assure the parents is that in these meetings, I try to direct some of that stuff away. Not saying that mom's not going to end up saying something, but I try very hard to direct. This meeting is focused on these issues, and we're not gonna. I know your mom's mad at you about this happening, but trying to really let's talk about kids. Let's talk about treatment plan. Those types of things, and try to assure them. Can I stop all that stuff from happening? No, but I feel like I can usually put a lid back on it. And so I would say yes and no. It's especially kinship or foster parents who have information mainly about the day-to-day care of these children. I feel like kind of need to be there. If there truly is not a reason that it won't work, then I have the foster parents or the kinship parents write me up information about the children. But I try really hard to. But if there is truly somebody that really shouldn't, they don't want there, what I'll then do is talk to the worker as well. Why would this, what are your feelings about this? That kind of stuff. So because the reality is that we got to work through this stuff too if we're going to have a successful reunification. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so kind of changing gears a little bit more too then, and this is kind of maybe outside of the scope of meetings a little bit. Like I said, you've been in this world long enough to kind of know how do you see CASA advocates supporting families between meetings? What are some things that they can be doing, and not even necessarily the child per se, but just the family. Maybe it was a rough
Yeah.
meeting or a tough meeting, or things just aren't going well, or things are going well. How do you see the role of CASA advocates supporting these families?
Well, I have seen CASA advocates become always the best interest of the children, but really become supporters of birth parents in a really positive way. And I think that if there is a relationship with the birth parents, they can be a really good sounding board for birth parents. I also think they can be really good cheerleaders for birth parents if it's appropriate, depending upon the situation. I also think they can be a conduit between sometimes foster parents, kinship parents, and the worker. I mean, I think workers have an amazingly difficult job, and sometimes some communicate really well, some don't communicate really well. It's just the reality of it all. So sometimes I think that if we've got a worker that isn't being able to communicate with the foster parents or kinship parents as well as we would hope, that CASA can step in and kind of fill in that role a little bit. Again, be careful, but I also think that can be helpful. Um, what can't, I'm going to say one of the things that I know for having worked on this job and worked with workers for so long is that it can be very difficult if CASAs appear to be demanding things. So if a CASA has an email, make that email, this is a situation, I really think this needs to happen. What can I do to help? Or and because the reality is that CASAs are incredibly important in the case, but they don't run the case. The state of Montana runs the case, and sometimes, if occasionally, I know that CASAs send these emails that the workers feel very like you're doing your job all wrong, and that isn't helpful. So I would say to CASA, if you're having frustration with another worker, talk to your peer person, your supervisor person, or the CASA staff person and talk it through with them before an email gets sent and see if we can figure out, what's really going on. So I would say just be respectful that this CPS or worker role or the whatever the new titles are
Right.
is a big job, and it's not that all most of our workers, I would of course there's always one or two, but most of our workers want to do an amazing job and really care about these kids and families. It's just a matter of time sometimes. We're not always going to agree, and that's okay. I mean, that's the other piece is that CASAs don't always agree with our plan, and that's okay. Just be respectful of your frustration and talk that through either with the worker or, but be careful about sending these, you need to do this and you need to do this now kind of emails, just are not going to help that relationship at all.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Kelly. That's actually one of the topics that we're going to get into in one of these podcasts is that communication and how to play nice in
Yeah.
the sandbox and yeah,
Yeah.
not come across as demanding.
No.
Exactly how you worded it, right? And just yeah, being curious. And again,
Yeah.
they're the experts. We aren't the experts, right? And
Yeah.
recognizing that. And I think that's one of the things that we try to express to advocates too, is that everyone has a different role to play,
Yeah.
and we're not always going to agree. And even
No.
sometimes the caseworker doesn't agree where the case is going, but legally there's mandates that have to be followed, and they may not like it either, but they don't have a choice. So,
There's that legal mandate
yep,
is very clear, and
yeah,
it's we remove because of safety issues, and sometimes emotional safety is put on a little bit on the back burner in my eyes,
yeah,
but if it's safe for them to go home,
yep,
we
yeah,
probably have to have them go home, even though we may be our own little like nervous about it. So
yeah.
luckily we don't get out right away. So that's the plus part
That's
is
yeah,
that,
that's true.
yeah, yeah.
What would be some, I guess, tips and tricks from your perspective, having been in this world for so long and working with families? How do you make sure that you stay objective and don't get, I guess, biased one way or another? Like really, like, oh, I'm so for mom that I'm ignoring safety concerns, or I'm so for parents or placement, right? This foster family, right? Like this is where the kid needs to be, and I guess just bias, good or bad, and almost getting rose-colored glasses. Or I don't know if my question makes sense, but how
Makes
do you
sense.
try to stay objective and not get swayed where, oh, mom's just so lovable and likable, right? And but you're ignoring safety concerns, or oh gosh, they would have such a great life with this foster family, right? They shouldn't go home. How do you remain objective?
Um, sometimes, I mean, luckily, because of what I do, I don't have as invested in these me as these, but I do get invested. Sometimes more with the youth and the youth-centered meetings in terms of what's happening in their lives, to be quite honest. And there's definitely times in family engagement meetings where I'm like, oh my gosh. I to remain objective is that first and foremost, I do have law and policy I have to follow. And I got to go back to that, and you got to go, okay, the policy says this, the law says this is safe. What are we going to do and then I think in terms of like, if it's like you're concerned about kids going home, what can you do as a CASA to support that? What can we do as a team to support those children going home? And but also being very careful, not walking in to, when you're visiting kids, to just find everything absolutely wrong. Because you're going to find things that are wrong. It's, and again, we're looking at safety. And so I think a clear understanding of safety, meaning more physical safety than anything, is really important when we do training, whether it's with CPS workers or CASAs or things like that. Just kind of a clear picture of, as well as understanding of the conditions of return and what they are and what they look like, and how we have to follow those in terms of decisions about kids going home. And I think that, and CASAs, I think, know this, but I think they just really need to know is that we don't take any of that lightly. We aren't running in and putting kids back home. Um, we're being as thoughtful and preparing as much as possible. And the CASA can be a great support, actually, if a child does go home, to make that successful, actually.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
it's hard.
It
And
is.
that's it's just, I mean, we're human beings. So I guess the other piece is that's really when, if you're meeting with your peer person or CASA staff on a somewhat regular basis, that's a good place is to talk it through with them. Say, I'm really concerned about this, and I'm really concerned that this is going to be a disaster, and I don't feel like the worker's listening to me. And then being able to talk that through with somebody. Um, and there might be what they need to know is there might be a part of us that we think, oh, this could be a disaster, but we're at this place where, you know,
Yeah.
we kind of don't have, I mean, because the judge is the ultimate decision maker. So, you've got a judge saying these kids need to get home. You better be figuring that out, or better come up with a very good reason for why they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And even just focusing on, like you mentioned, what do we have control over, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, making sure there's supports and services
Yeah.
in the home
Yeah.
and coming alongside that child and help with that transition and
Yeah.
coming in and supporting parents, like you said, not nitpicking every little reason why
Yeah.
this isn't going to work, right? So,
Because it's easy to do that. I mean,
yeah,
because we're all not perfect. And,
yeah,
again, safety, definition of safety is there, we're pretty clear about a lot of stuff, but like a messy house, as long as it's not in a
hmm
inappropriately messy, is not a safety issue.
right.
Unless it's a hoarder house that's got poop all over the place
hmm
from the cat and the baby's walking around, you know what I mean? But if you're talking, you got an 8-year-old, again,
Yeah,
we wouldn't be okay with poop everywhere, but a little
yeah.
messiness isn't necessarily going to stop us from
Mm.
turning kids home.
Sometimes I kind of use the analogy of poor parenting versus, yeah,
Yeah.
safety, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
they might have some poor
Exactly.
parenting practices and not
Yeah.
ideal, but it's not a safety concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Exactly.
which is
Exactly.
hard, right? For I think,
Yeah.
recognizing that a lot of advocates come into this world,
Yeah.
it's a brand new world to them, right?
Brand
They've
new
never
world.
kind of seen the dark side, right, of child
No.
abuse and neglect, and
No.
it's kind of just all eye-opening and like, what do you mean that that's okay? It's like, yeah, you're probably not gonna like hang out there and like that's not how you keep your
No.
house, but it's not a safety concern. And so
No.
I
Exactly.
think that's hard for some folks when they come into this world, just that standard a little bit. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. Because it's, if you've not been involved,
hmm
if you maybe have been a teacher, they're probably a counselor, teachers, or something. You may have a little more experience, but a lot of the, you got business people who are
Yep.
walking in, which I
Yeah.
love, but
Yeah.
then you got to figure out how to, yeah, learn.
hmm
The standards might be slightly different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Kelly, just a couple other questions as we close up here. If you could give one piece of advice to our CASA advocates about participating in these child welfare meetings, what would it be?
To participate. I mean,
Love
I
it.
think that sometimes I will ask CASAs and they'll be like, and I really want if I'm asking them their opinion, their general, not necessarily opinion, but if I'm asking them their thoughts about what they're seeing, I want it. So,
Perfect.
and to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, show up, participate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
I kind of feel like that's just like in court, like you're a visual representation of that
Yeah.
child, right?
Yeah.
In those meetings
Exactly.
of, yeah, hey, don't forget we have a kid here. Like you said, that
Yeah.
so much of these
Yeah.
cases become about the parents and what they're doing in treatment plan. Acasa just being there is going to remind folks like, hey, we have a kiddo here that this is going to impact, and what is that going to look like? So I love that. Okay, so last question for you. What gives you hope when you see families and advocates working together throughout these processes?
Um,
Or I guess
I
even just
just,
what
I,
gives you hope in general, yeah, in these cases.
um, what gives me hope? I would say that what gives me hope is watching a team work really hard to come up with a really good plan for a child, and being thoughtful about that plan. And maybe it's not going back to mom and dad, but what's our second plan or third plan, and how is that coming? How is that coming along? Um, and I think why I like the youth-centered meetings so much, maybe they shouldn't be, because it's really scary to watch knowing a child's about ready to, but to be able to be part of that plan and help kids, get to that next level, whether it's college, whether it's staying in the supported living environment for a couple more months and getting your feet on the ground, is really also really hopeful for me, because we have a lot of kids who have done amazingly well given their circumstances.
Mhm.
And that gives me hope as well. But my biggest hope is always that we can get these kids back either with their parents or in kinship placements that are healthy for them, and that they can just continue to grow and thrive. And I have seen it time and time again. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, and that's the reality of, sadly, of the state of Montana. As I say, the state of Montana, in any state, we aren't good parents. That's not, should not be our role, but we sometimes become
Correct.
almost parents for these kids. depending upon the situation. But I do know that I think the hope is I do know that I've seen birth parents completely turn it around. And that's always amazing to me to watch that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah,
So
thank you for that. Just kind of as a follow-up to that, like I said, you've been in this world for quite a while. Like what keeps you coming back every day? Like what keeps you sane? What is if it's self-care or how have you stayed in this world so long?
I'm not the best at self-care. I'm really good at
Okay.
getting on other people's cases about self-care. But
Okay.
I'm trying to do that. I mean, I could you think at age 60 I would be better at it. But I am better at it in the sense that this particular job I have is not as stressful as a lot of the jobs I've had in the past. So that is one way. In some ways, I took care of myself is to do it, to go into a role that's not so crisis oriented that I'm not getting woken up at 2 a.m. So in some ways, that for me was
Mhm.
self-care, was doing a role that I could still be involved. And what keeps me going, I would say the two things is watching children and families and parents change and grow. And to be quite honest, the people I work with, I think that those who stay and work for child and family services for a long time, it's because they've got really great staff and other, people they work with in the terms of coworkers and other people out there outside the world but are kind of part of the world. I think that really helps me as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, because it's a tough job, right? It's a tough
Yep,
world. There's
yep.
a lot of trauma you're
It's a tough,
exposed to, and
yep. It's a tough world. And again, and then like I said, for me, it was I had to look at a role a little different. So
hmm
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, Kelly, that's all the questions I have for you. I don't know if you have anything additional, maybe that you want to add that I didn't ask, that you want advocates to know or to hear.
Don't think so. I think we did a great job of kind of going back and forth about all that. So
Okay, perfect. And my guess is, and feel free to say like, absolutely not. But if anybody has any further questions or like, hey, I still don't quite understand this about FEMs, are they more than can they reach
please,
out to
yes,
you and
reach out
ask?
to me
Okay,
anytime. Usually
perfect.
email's the first place to start for me.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect.
yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Well, again, thank you so much. Like I said, hopefully this wasn't too bad for you. And
Once we got
um,
going.
yeah, just more of a conversation. So I
Yep.
do
Yep.
appreciate it. And like I said, I think this will be super helpful for advocates because I think it's just like, what is this meeting? What is this meeting?
Yep.
And again, it's
Yep.
a whole brand new world, and the more
No
information I think we can give them, the better. So again, thank
worries.
you very much, Kelly. I appreciate it.
No problem, Carrie. Thank you.
Okay. All
Have a
right.
good week.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.